Right, Lord Digby Jones, welcome to this event.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I just heard you giving a speech. It was a wonderful speech. It was, really, you could just tell the audience were really getting very inspired by it. And one of the key elements of your speech was that you are here to celebrate.
Yeah, so it's so important that businesses, especially smaller businesses, actually understand how vital they are to a local community such as Coventry, to a wider region such as Coventry and Warwickshire, and then to the nation, because it's only business that generates wealth. I mean, when you make money in a business, you either reward the shareholders and they pay tax, you keep it in the business, you pay tax, or you employ people and they pay tax. And so jobs and taxation only come from creating wealth, and that only comes from business. And I don't think that politicians and educationalists and environmentalists and trade unionists and journalists get it. I think they think it grows on trees, personally.
Yeah, because that came out very much in your speech, that you've got a bit of a downer, haven't you?
Oh, it's a real problem. I applaud the Chamber actually for having this, business is good for Britain slogan, because we are, without business, there's no public sector. Of course you need the good, decent people who work in it, but you've got to pay them. And you can only get the money from the wealth that's created and the tax that's paid and the jobs that are created in the private sector. And this integral part of business in our community, I think, is lost on a lot of people.
But how do we get that inspiration back, that incentive? Because it is a gloomy time, isn't it, for so many small businesses?
Yeah, I think, if you're exporting at the moment, and I think the Chamber's new initiative on getting business to export more is to be applauded. Because if you're exporting, especially if you're exporting to Asia, Brazil or America, you, by and large, you're doing all right. You've got people who are getting richer, who've got money to spend, will spend it on what you make and the services you provide. So exporting companies in Britain at the moment, it's challenging, but you're doing all right. If you're relying on your domestic market or Western Europe, you've got a problem for sure.
And also, I mean, one of the things that did come out was that you've, forgive me if I'm wrong, the government are very much to blame.
Well, it's always a problem because politicians always get the blame. Whatever happens, blame a politician. And, quite a bit of the time they deserve it. But there's three integral parts of this, really. We could do really with a government that stops managing a coalition and starts leading a nation. And that really does mean get behind the wealth creators. I don't mean tax cuts as, for wealthy people. Why don't we actually have anybody on the minimum wage not paying income tax? Now that's right at the bottom end, so that's a fat category. But what that would mean is that it's worth more to go to work than it is actually to sit on the dole. Secondly, small businesses that take on one more person, perhaps that kid who's suddenly no longer paying income tax, don't charge them national insurance contributions on it, because national insurance contributions are a tax on jobs, not on profit. And then thirdly, just get behind a small business who wants to export. Fund them, meet them halfway on the cost of the airline ticket, or help them with the display stand in an exhibition overseas. Just understand what small businesses particularly can need in the way of help. This is not about, businessmen, right, let's give them big tax breaks at the top. That's not what we're talking about. It's about putting a bit of oomph into the economy. And the trouble with the current crop of politicians, of all three parties actually, if you watch what they do rather than what they say, they don't get it. And it's no good them saying they do, because if they did get it, why do we have a Secretary of State for Business that gets into a car made in Tokyo and buys his trains from Dusseldorf?
Just going back to your point, I mean, you mentioned apprenticeship. Now, I know this is a very huge, big area of yours, isn't it? How do we get that going, though? Because it looks very good, doesn't it, on paper?
Well, the mood music's got to change a bit. I mean, this year, we have more apprenticeships starting than we do undergraduates. For the first year in 40 years, 480,000 young people will start an apprenticeship, 440,000 will start a degree. Now, that's to be continued. The challenge is to stop the attrition rate, because apprenticeships tend to come to an end, people pack it in more than when they go to university. So we need employers to keep at it. Don't have them licking the stamps and making the tea, boring them to death. Get them engaged in your business. Yes, it's expensive, training is, but if you think training's expensive, just try ignorance.
Yeah, we heard one of the delegates today talking about how engineering is exciting, and getting the 14-year-olds and getting the school kids in to actually start to want to start an apprenticeship.
Coventry in Warwickshire is at the top end of a triangle where 80% of all the Formula One engineering, and that's exciting, that's sexy all around the world, it all happens a stone's throw from here. Now, to get a kid at 14 to think, I want to be a Formula One engineer, no, I can't.
Fantastic.
Well, it ticks so many boxes, it's
Yeah,
not true. And they don't
fantastic.
have to go to university to do it.
And finally, what sort of message would you like to give to people, you know, the members of the Chamber of Commerce, the Coventry and Warwickshire Chamber of
I would
Commerce?
say, get your head up, you're important. Don't be browbeaten by journalists and trade unionists and politicians who say, you know, oh, business is at it, business is just fat cats and everything else. You're so important to a local community, you're so important to our society. Just celebrate your success, and then every day, in every way, train your people, invest in your kit, and get out round the world using Coventry and Warwickshire Chamber. I mean, they're good at it, they know what they're talking about, they've got initiative after initiative to help you. Get round the world and sell to getting wealthier people who want to buy your goods, because you come from one of the great brands of the world, that's the United Kingdom.
Lord Digby Jones of Birmingham, thank you.
My pleasure.